Okay, now we move into our gospel passage, which comes from John chapter 9, verses 1 through 41. So a very long one, just like last week. As Jesus passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "Neither he nor his parents sinned. It is so that the works of God might be made visible through him. We have to do the works of the one who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." When he had said this, he spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva, and smeared the clay on his eyes, and said to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. So he went and washed and came back able to see. His neighbors and those who had seen him earlier as a beggar said, "Isn't this the one who used to sit and beg?" Some said, "It is." But others said, "No, he just looks like him." He said, "I am." So they said to him, "How were your eyes opened?" He replied, "The man called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes and told me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' So I went there and washed and was able to see." And they said to him, "Where is he?" He said, "I don't know." They brought the one who was once blind to the Pharisees. Now Jesus had made clay and opened his eyes on a Sabbath. So then the Pharisees also asked him how he was able to see. He said to them, "He put clay on my eyes, and I washed, and now I can see." So some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, because he does not keep the Sabbath." But others said, "How can a sinful man do such signs?" And there was a division among them. So they said to the blind man again, "What do you have to say about him, since he opened your eyes?" He said, "He is a prophet." Now the Jews did not believe that he had been blind and gained his sight until they summoned the parents of the one who had gained his sight. They asked them, "Is this your son, who you say was born blind? How does he now see?" His parents answered and said, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind. We do not know how he sees now, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he is of age. He can speak for himself." His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that if anyone acknowledged him as the Christ, he would be expelled from the synagogue. For this reason his parents said, "He is of age, question him." So a second time they called the man who had been blind and said to him, "Give God the praise. We know that this man is a sinner." He replied, "If he is a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know is that I was blind, and now I see." So they said to him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered them, "I told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too?" They ridiculed him and said, "You are that man's disciple. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but we do not know where this one is from." The man answered and said to them, "This is what is so amazing, that you do not know where he is from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if one is devout and does his will, he listens to him. It is unheard of that anyone ever opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he would not be able to do anything." They answered and said to him, "You were born totally in sin, and are you trying to teach us?" Then they threw him out. When Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, he found him and said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered and said, "Who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he." He said, "I do believe, Lord," and he worshipped him. Then Jesus said, "I came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see might see, and those who do see might become blind." Some of the Pharisees who were with him heard this and said to him, "Surely we are not also blind, are we?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you are saying, 'We see,' so your sin remains." Okay, long gospel passage. It's long gospel passage season. We got the one the last week, this week, and next week, and then eventually Palm Sunday. So anyway, there's just lots of long gospel passages, and they're all so good. The story is so powerful. Okay, so let's bust through it here. So Jesus passed by. He saw a man blind from birth, and his disciples are asking, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" So at the time of Jesus, there was an understanding that there's a direct connection between illness and sin. So if a person was ill for some reason, blind or had a disease or something else, it was because of their sin or their parents' sin that somehow it was pushed through from their parents to that person. And you notice what's interesting. So Jesus says, neither he nor his parents sinned. It is so that the works of God might be made visible through him. So there's two things that I think are really interesting. First is that Jesus doesn't outright deny the reality that people can get sick or can have severe consequences because of their personal sin. So he's not outright rejecting the personal link between illness and sin. So it is very possible that a person could, because of their own sinfulness, end up in a very bad place. For example, a person who is driving after having had too much to drink, they could get into a terrible accident and be paralyzed or worse, but nonetheless they could be paralyzed. And so it's like, okay, well, it's because of their sin that they're paralyzed. At the same time, he obviously doesn't say that this is the case each and every time, because he says here, this isn't the case in this particular situation, that neither he nor his parents sinned. So he's outright rejecting that it's always the case that a person is sick because of either their sin or their parents' sins. So that's interesting. The second thing, though, is what we could call like God's providential plan. So what does he say? He says, it is so that the works of God might be made visible through him. This is really interesting. Why do good things happen to bad people? Why do people get born into really crummy situations? Here he's saying, at least in this case, that this man was born into really crummy situations so that the works of God could be made manifest in him. So in other words, it's like, imagine if he wasn't blind, then Jesus wouldn't perform the miracle on him that he's about to perform. But because he's born into a really crummy situation, Jesus now has space to perform an incredible miracle through him. It seems like it's like against God's will, and yet somehow the Lord allows it to bring about a greater good. And this ultimately is what we would talk about when we talk about God's providence. That there are times when it seems like the Lord is not present, but he actually is present, and he's just preparing for something great, something greater than the current situation to come about as by way of the crummy situation. Which is really hard, I know, for some people to grasp and to really believe. I might even intellectually understand it, but when I'm in the midst of a really crummy situation, it might be really hard for me to believe that. So I totally understand that. And I think that's part of why we have situations like this in the Gospels, where we can clearly see this guy spent his whole life not ever believing that God was going to heal him, because he says it's unheard of that anyone ever opened the eyes of a person born blind. So for him, he's like, we've never heard anything like this, and so he had no real hope that this was ever going to happen. But from that hopeless place, Jesus could enter in and open his eyes. So there's, I think, just maybe a little bit of hope, hopefully, for some people. Okay, nonetheless, what happens? So we have to do the works of the one who sent me while it is day, night is coming. Okay, while I'm in the world, I am the light of the world. This is so big, so important, that Jesus is the light of the world. He's come to bring illumination to people. And how does he bring that illumination? At least in this particular case, he does this really gross thing where he spits on the ground and makes clay with his saliva. You think of how much saliva that must have taken to make clay out of the ground, like a ton. That's just disgusting. It would have taken him time to do that. But then two, just the sheer volume of saliva that it would have taken for that to happen. But then he smears the clay on his eye. So again, just nasty. It's a real incarnational experience for this man that I'm just really glad that, obviously it's a miracle, and so you'd be really delighted about it. But nonetheless, having eyes that work, I'm delighted that I have eyes that work so that I don't have to experiment with things like this. But anyway, so he smears clay on his eyes, and then he says, go and wash in the pool of Siloam. Which means sent. So Siloam is a thing that was established by King Hezekiah in 2 Kings chapter 20, verse 20. 2 Kings chapter 20, verse 20. That was meant to be a water supply for the city. But here, Jesus and John are working in tandem here to say, okay, go and wash in this pool. That means sent. So this pool becomes like a symbol of Jesus, who was sent by the Father to pour living water into our souls, which we talked about last week with the woman at the well, the living water that Jesus has come to give us. So this whole scene is like an image of baptism in a way, because what happens when a person is baptized, they are washed with water, they are anointed with oil, and the result is that their mind is enlightened. There's illumination given to them, light given to them, so that they can spiritually see in a more clear way. So it's a really cool image of baptism, a real miracle that took place, and also an image of baptism that takes place for all who believe in Jesus and are baptized in his name. Okay, so that's cool. Now what happens? So his neighbors, they hear what's going on, and they're just like, what in the world is the deal? And they're like, I don't think this is even the guy. And he's like, no, I'm this guy. And then what happens? They begin to question him, and there's this progression of the identity of Jesus as perceived by this man. So notice what it says. Okay, so how are your eyes open? He replied, the man called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes. So the man called Jesus. Later on, they asked Jesus, what do you have to say about him since he opened your eyes? He is a prophet. So he goes from being a man to a prophet. And then later on it says, if this man were not from God, he would not be able to do anything. So from being a man to a prophet to a man who comes from God. So that's progressing. And then finally, at the very end, I do believe, Lord. So just like last week with the woman at the well, there was a progression of who Jesus was in his identity. That culminates, or that comes to its conclusion in seeing him to be the Lord who is to be worshipped. So too, it's actually very similar in this passage where Jesus begins to be understood merely as a man, then finally in the very end is understood to be the Lord who is worshipped, and then he worshipped him. Really, really cool thing. And this is like an image of what, again, so during these weeks of Lent, the church is particularly interested in those who are about to be baptized at Easter. Those adults who are about to be baptized at Easter, and the enlightenment of their minds about Jesus. And so they're giving an image, but also a model of what it's meant to look like for all people to come to know Jesus and to believe in him, to worship him, and to enter into his life. To see him perhaps merely as a man, but then over the course of time to understand that he's more than a man, that he actually is the Lord of the universe who is to be worshipped. So anyway, that's what it's meant to be for the newly baptized, or the people who are about to be baptized, the catechumens. But really, it's also for us, even if we're already baptized, to understand, to come to grow to a deeper understanding of who Jesus is. Okay, so then we got to keep going. So what happens? The Pharisees, they're just goofballs, you know. So they don't understand. Well, they understand what took place, but they like skip over the whole miracle altogether, as though like just ignoring the fact that this man was born blind and now he can see. You know, that's like an incredible thing that took place. And they focus on like, well, this took place on a Sabbath. And for the Jewish laws, you can't work on the Sabbath. And so they see Jesus working a miracle as doing illegal activity to bring about freedom for this man. When in fact, what is the Sabbath for? The Sabbath is for rest. And what does Jesus provide for this man who was born under the burden of blindness? Provides rest from that, relief from his burden. So Jesus actually does provide the very rest that these guys insist that Jesus didn't provide. And so because he didn't provide that, it begins this whole interrogation process. This whole like, who is this? We got to find this guy. We got to arrest him because he's doing all this illegal activity, performing miracles on the Sabbath. Like, oh yeah, he performed a miracle on the Sabbath. Like clearly that's something from God, you know? Anyway, so they bring in his parents. And his parents, why would they bring in his parents? Because they would be the most credible of all the witnesses. Because they would have known him, or they did know him from his birth. And so they themselves could say, yeah, we actually know from his birth that he's been blind this entire time. And the parents, of course, they're concerned about excommunication. And so when they're directly questioned about him, like how did he get to know his sight, they're just like, you got to ask him. He's of age. He's an adult. He can answer for himself, because they don't want to be excommunicated, because they know that the Pharisees had already decided that if anyone acknowledged Jesus as the Christ, they were going to be expelled, excommunicated. That means expelled from their public gatherings of prayer on the Sabbath, as well as from the fellowship. So that would have been a really tragic thing. You think of that, like you go to your church on a Sunday, and the priest greets you at the door and he says, you're actually not welcome here. You have to leave. You have to go. Like that would be a really tragic situation, very dramatic, very tragic, and it's just like I would feel so bad about that, you know. And so like that's what these people are thinking of. Is like, okay, well we actually don't fully know the answer, so we're not going to lie, but at the same time we're gonna say like we don't have an answer to give, so you got to ask him, and he can provide an answer for himself. So then they go to the man and they're like, give God the praise. This is like an oath swearing thing of like, tell the truth of what we're about to ask here. What happened? We know this man is a sinner. And then I love this man. He's just like, whether he's a sinner, I don't know, actually. But what I do know is that I was born blind and now I can see. So it's like you almost get caught up in the joy of this man of just like, look, I don't pretend to know exactly what's going on here. But what I do know is that this man healed me of my blindness, and we don't have any examples from history of someone being healed of their blindness when they were born being blind. There are examples of people being healed of their blindness, like Tobit, for example, when the bird droppings drop into his eye and he's blinded, and the archangel Raphael helps to bring healing to him. But there aren't examples of people born blind who then were healed on the spot. Like that, this is incredible. And so he's just like so caught up in the joy that the Pharisees are like trying to interrogate him and trap him and, get him to admit whatever they want him to admit. And he's just like, I don't know. I don't know what the deal is. But what I do know is he healed me. And that's an incredible thing. So then he's like, why are you asking me this? Why like, do you actually want to believe in him? So again, it's like he's so caught up in the joy of like, I don't even know who this guy is, but I want to believe in him, that they're like, he's asking them, maybe you too want to believe in this guy too. You should, in fact. It'd be incredible. So they're just like mocking him, and they're like, no, you believe in him. Finally, we believe in Moses. We believe that because God spoke to Moses. We don't even know who this guy is. And again, he goes back into like, okay, well, here's the deal. God doesn't listen to sinners. So this guy must be from God, because if he were not from God, he would not be able to do anything. So anyway, then they're like, okay, you were born in sin. So they're still making that connection that Jesus had already dismissed. You were born totally in sin. Like there was some sin from your parents or from yourself, even as a baby, whatever it is, that like was like your blindness was a result of that. And so you're born into sin, and you're trying to convince us who are living this righteous life, get out of here. So they threw him out. And what happens? Jesus hears this. Comes to him and says, do you believe in the Son of Man? The Son of Man, this is a phrase from Daniel chapter 7, where the Son of Man comes on the clouds with glory. So in other words, the divine Messiah that everyone's been waiting for. So Jesus is like, do you believe in the Son of Man? And this guy's like, I don't even know who he is, but tell me so that I can believe in him. And Jesus is like, I'm the guy. I'm him. You've seen him, which is, again, a striking thing. This man at the beginning of the scene was blind. So now for Jesus to say, you have seen him, it's like already going through the whole progression of just like, remember when your eyes were open for the first time and who it was that you saw? That's me. And I am the Son of Man. So then from there, this man is like total illumination, drops to his knees, falls prostrate before him. He says, I do believe, Lord. And he worshiped him. Incredible. So then from there, Jesus speaks this truth. I've come into the world for judgment so that those who do not see might see, like this man. And of course, Jesus is speaking in a spiritual way. He performs the miracle to show that he can perform this spiritual miracle in a way like he performed this physical miracle. And those who do see might become blind. So in other words, those who are the religious leaders, those who are supposedly living a righteous life, but they're really stuck in their own pride, that they might become blind. And so the Pharisees are like, okay, what's the deal? We're not blind. We see. And Jesus is like, no, you say that you see. And because you say that you see, your sin remains with you because you are openly rejecting me. That's incredible. So it's like a warning, actually. It kind of finishes with a warning. So there's this invitation to get caught up in the joy of this man who'd been healed and to seek healing ourselves and illumination. But in the end, there's a warning of like, if we get stuck in our own pridefulness and we claim that we have it all figured out, then in the end, Jesus is going to say, your sin remains. So there's like a call to repentance, even while there's a call to ongoing conversion, a call to enlightenment, a call to love Jesus, to worship him as the Lord. So good. And St. Paul actually is going to talk more about this in our second reading. So this is actually, during Lent, the second reading tends to match up better with the Gospels. So we'll see you for that one coming up soon. Peace.